Ohio this year ended the year with 66 tornadoes, which actually put us ahead of Kansas, which is crazy to think of because everyone thinks of Kansas as the tornado capital of the United States. And granted, the tornadoes that we got, most of them were EF1s. They were not like the EF5s that they get in Kansas that level entire cities, but still to an area that has never really had to deal with tornadoes and is not really designed, our buildings are not, they're not really up to code for tornadoes. There's never really been a thing that's happened in our area before. So it's really made us reevaluate.
And we're speaking with Nico Viola, the Director of Facilities at Holden Forests and Gardens in Cleveland, Ohio. We're talking with Nico about disaster recovery, and in August, Forest Gardens experienced something it had never done before: tornadoes. The damage was severe enough that the facility was forced to close and staff left to assess the damage. The aftermath resulted in Nico and his staff changing their disaster recovery plan. Nico, could you first briefly tell us a little bit about the storm and some of the damage that Holden sustained?
Sure. Back on August 6th of this year, it was beautiful morning. Weather was perfect. It's a nice day. And then around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a massive line of storms came in across Lake Erie, just picked up energy from the lake very quickly. It intensified into what was really on par with like a low-level hurricane. Widespread devastation. That storm produced 4 tornadoes in the matter of the 2 hours or so that it was on the ground, and a macro burst that covered basically our entire county. One of those tornadoes skirted along the edge lines of our property, and the macro burst just came straight through. Straight line winds just did a massive amount of devastation. Just trees just snapped off and laid down every which direction. Some of these larger trees ended up taking out the main cables for our canopy walk, which is a system of suspension bridges that runs through the forest. They're about 65 feet off the ground at its highest point over the valley. And the one bridge just took a direct hit and had just a substantial amount of damage. In the 13 years or so that that bridge has been there, it's never once taken a hit like that. So it was pretty devastating.
You'd actually given a recent presentation on this, and the result of that storm meant that you had to update your disaster plan to include recovery from tornadoes. Why were tornadoes really something that Holden had never really considered having to worry about, and why is that essential now?
Tornadoes were not common in Ohio, at least in northern Ohio. Southern Ohio, the Dayton area, more the area out towards Indiana, they would get some occasional tornadoes, but it's not very common that the Cleveland area gets tornadoes, let alone 4 in one day. I don't think that's ever happened before. But with shifting weather patterns, it's becoming more apparent that these types of storms that can produce these damaging winds and tornadoes are happening more often. Ohio this year ended the year with 66 tornadoes, which actually put us ahead of Kansas, which is crazy to think of because everyone thinks of Kansas as the tornado capital of the United States. And granted, the tornadoes that we got, most of them were EF1s. They were not like the EF5s that they get in Kansas that level entire cities, but still to an area that has never really had to deal with tornadoes and is not really designed, our buildings are not, they're not really up to code for tornadoes. There's never really been a thing that's happened in our area before. So it's really made us reevaluate a lot of what we do. We've had to update our disaster plan as a result of it. We're putting policies into place now where if there's high wind warnings or tornado warnings, what we'll do. But the problem we're very quickly experiencing is so much of the property is so remote that if you have people down in the valley, there's no cell service. So we're trying to figure out what is going to be involved with that. We're looking into literally tornado sirens, different things that we might have to invest in because it became apparent very fast how badly things can go.
From a takeaway such as this, Nico, now that you're obviously, 4 or 5 months away from that, what are some of the lessons that you and your staff learned about disaster recovery? And maybe you learn a little bit more about your facility and just some of the things you need to do in these situations.
Fortunately for me, my background actually was in disaster mitigation and remediation. I worked for many years for Blue Sky. And then I also worked locally for another restoration company before coming to Carrera. I worked for Carrera before coming to Holden is what I meant to say. That experience definitely helped me in a situation like this. No one else that worked with me or for me has experience in disaster remediation. So when the storm hit and I saw the level of damage that came through, I very quickly knew what to do, took command, started working through the processes. But it's very telling of where we were as an organization. we do fire drills, we do active shooter training, we do all the things that normal organizations do for the normal situations you expect to experience. Never had tornadoes crossed our minds. It's just not something that happened. So as a result, we're going back through, we're updating our guidance, we're updating our reporting. We're actually rewriting our disaster emergency response plan now to include tornadoes. And that's still a work in progress, but it's becoming apparent, weather patterns are shifting. Things are getting worse. Parts of the country that are not used to seeing severe weather are starting to see severe weather. And we all just have to adjust and adapt and be prepared for it.